She escaped her abusive husband and boarded a plane. Unaware, the man beside her was a Mafia boss. Lisa's hands were shaking so violently she could barely grip the passport. 4:10 a.m. The house was silent. Silas was asleep upstairs. She had exactly 17 minutes before his alarm went off, and he'd checked the tracker on her phone, the phone she'd left charging on the nightstand with a pre-recorded loop of her breathing. 17 minutes to become a ghost. The bruises on her throat were still fresh from 3 nights ago when she'd burned his dinner, purple and yellow, blooming like wounds that wouldn't heal. She'd covered them with foundation so thick it cracked when she swallowed. But in the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m., she'd seen the truth. If I stay, he will kill me. It's not if. It's when. 2 years of marriage. 6 months of planning. 6 months of hiding money in the spine of a cookbook. 6 months of practicing her escape in her head like other women practiced yoga. 6 months of lying so perfectly still beside him that her own heartbeat sounded like thunder. The taxi driver didn't ask why a woman in a cashmere coat was crying at a red light before dawn. At the airport, Lisa moved like prey, shoulders hunched, eyes down, waiting for his security team to grab her by the hair and drag her back to the estate. Every announcement made her flinch. Every man in a dark suit made her breath stop. Gate Beardsan. She bought the ticket with cash she'd stolen from his wallet, $1 at a time. The woman at the counter smiled and said, "Have a nice flight. If you only knew." Row 14, seat C, window. She pressed against the glass and watched the ground crew like they were the last people on Earth who didn't know her secret. Then a man slid into 14B, tailored suit, tattooed hands, a scar on his collarbone that looked like it had a story worth killing for. He smelled like cedar and gunpowder. He didn't look at her. He looked at the aisle like he owned it. The plane started moving. Lisa closed her eyes and prayed to a god she'd stopped believing in. "Please, just let me disappear." The wheels lifted. For 3 seconds, she felt free. Then the man beside her spoke, and his voice was sharp enough to cut through steel. "You're running from someone." It wasn't a question. Lisa's journey is just beginning, and it's going to get intense. If this story is resonating with you, please like this video and subscribe. It truly helps us reach others who need to hear stories like Lisa's. Now, let's get back to the story. Lisa had rehearsed this moment 300 times in her head. In her fantasies, she was calm, collected. She walked out the front door like a woman who had every right to leave. In reality, her entire body was a live wire of terror, and the battered purse in her hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 4:10 a.m. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked like a countdown to her execution. She'd left Silas asleep in their bed, his arms stretched across the cold space where she should have been. She'd placed 2 pillows under the duvet, shaped them into the curve of a body, and prayed he wouldn't wake before she made it past the gates. The front door's lock was the loudest sound in the universe. Click. She froze. Waited. Listened for the creak of floorboards upstairs. For his voice, sharp and controlled, asking where she thought she was going. For the sound of his footsteps that always came before his hands. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. She slipped outside. The October air hit her face like a slap of freedom, cold and clean and tasting like possibility. The estate stretched behind her, a monument to Silas Thorne's empire, all glass and stone and perfectly manicured hedges. To the world, it was a masterpiece. To Lisa, it was a mausoleum where she'd buried herself alive for 2 years. She walked fast. Not running would draw attention. Just a woman in yoga pants and an oversized hoodie, moving through the pre-dawn shadows like she had somewhere important to be. The gates were 50 feet away. 40, 30. Her phone, the decoy phone, was still charging on the nightstand, looping a recording of her soft breathing. She'd watched a YouTube video on how to fake your location. Bought a burner phone with cash from a convenience store 3 towns over. She'd planned this the way generals planned wars. But plans didn't account for the animal panic clawing up her throat. 20 feet. The security camera above the gate swiveled. She kept her head down, kept walking. The gates were on a timer. They opened automatically at 4:15 a.m. For the landscaping crew, she had 2 minutes. Please, please, please. The gate hummed, began to slide open. She slipped through the gap before it was even halfway, and suddenly she was on the other side. Outside. Free. Her knees almost buckled. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. No cars. No witnesses, just Lisa and the sound of her own ragged breathing. She pulled out the burner phone and opened the rideshare app she'd downloaded yesterday. Her fingers were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to type the pickup location. A car accepted, 4 minutes away. She stood under a streetlight and waited, arms wrapped around herself, eyes locked on the estate behind her, waiting for the lights to blaze on. For Silas to come roaring out in his Mercedes, his face twisted with the rage she knew so well. The car pulled up, a beat-up Honda with an air freshener shaped like a pine tree. The driver rolled down the window. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and a coffee-stained shirt. "You, Lisa." She nodded, couldn't speak. He popped the trunk. She threw her bag inside and climbed into the back seat, sinking low like she could disappear into the upholstery. "Where to?" he asked. "Airport," she whispered. He pulled away from the curb. The estate grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Smaller. Smaller. Gone. They drove in silence for 3 minutes. Then the driver glanced at her in the mirror. "You okay, miss? You look a little—" "I'm fine." Her voice cracked. "I'm just visiting my sister." The first lie a survivor learns to master. He nodded slowly. Didn't push. People never did when you gave them an easy answer. But as they merged onto the highway, Lisa's chest tightened with a new fear. What if he's already awake? What if he's already called his people? She disabled the tracker on her real phone. Left it behind. The burner was clean, no connection to her old life. But Silas had resources she couldn't imagine. Money that could turn exit signs into dead ends. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and tried to breathe. Just get on the plane. Just make it to the sky. The airport was a blur of fluorescent lights and the mechanical voices of gate announcements. Lisa moved through security like a sleepwalker, convinced every TSA agent could see the guilt written across her face. Her boarding pass crumpled in her fist. Gate B14. The numbers swam in her vision. She bought a bottle of water she couldn't afford and sat with her back against the wall, watching every face that passed. Looking for Silas's security team, the men in dark suits with earpieces who followed him everywhere. Men with names like Christoph and Javon who called him Sir and looked at Lisa like she was an expensive vase that might shatter if handled incorrectly. The boarding call came. Her legs barely carried her down the jet bridge. Row 14. Seat C. Window. She collapsed into it and pressed her forehead against the cold plastic oval, staring at the tarmac below. Ground crew in orange vests moved around the plane like ants. Normal people doing normal jobs. People who went home at night without checking over their shoulders. She used to be one of them. The aisle filled with passengers wrestling luggage into overhead bins, businessmen on phones, a mother bribing a toddler with goldfish crackers. Then someone stopped beside her row. She didn't look up, didn't want to make eye contact, didn't want to be seen. But she felt him. The air shifted, got heavier. A presence slid into seat 14B with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't ask permission it assumed the world would make space. Lisa kept her eyes fixed on the window. But she could feel him. The heat of another body too close in the cramped row. The scent that drifted over cedar and something darker, like winter nights and expensive whiskey, clean but dangerous. The kind of smell that made you think of closed-door meetings and decisions that didn't involve lawyers. She risked a glance. Charcoal suit, tailored so perfectly it looked painted on. Black shirt underneath, open just enough to reveal a collarbone and a scar, thin and deliberate, like someone had signed their name on his skin with a blade. But it was his hands that stopped her breath. Tattooed. Both of them. Intricate black ink that started at his knuckles and disappeared under his cuffs. Not the messy flash art kind. The kind that cost serious money and serious pain. She caught glimpses of roses, thorns, something that looked like a cross wrapped in barbed wire. His fingers drummed once on the armrest between them. Long fingers. Steady. No wedding ring. Just ink and old scars, and the casual authority of a man who'd never doubted there would be space for him anywhere he chose to sit. He didn't look at her. He looked at the aisle. Then at his watch, something sleek and silver that probably cost more than her escape fund. Then at nothing, his jaw set, like he was running calculations in a language only he spoke. The plane pushed back from the gate. Lisa's heart hammered against her ribs. The runway stretched ahead like a promise. The engines roared. She gripped the armrest so hard her knuckles went white. The wheels lifted. For one perfect second, gravity let her go. She was flying. She was free. The ground didn't own her anymore. Then the man beside her shifted, and she caught the full weight of his presence. Up close, she could see more details. the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his suit jacket pulled tight across his shoulders. The ink on his left hand arose in full bloom, wrapped around his thumb, thorns biting into the webbing between his fingers. He still hadn't looked at her. But then, as if he could feel her staring, his head turned, just slightly. Dark eyes, sharp as broken glass, the kind of eyes that saw everything and forgot nothing. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just looked at her for one long, unbearable moment, and Lisa saw something flicker across his face. Recognition. Not like he knew her name. Like he knew what she was. Pray. The seatbelt sign dinged off. He looked away first, pulled out a phone, and started typing with those tattooed fingers. Lisa's mouth went dry. She turned back to the window, pulse slamming in her ears. Somewhere behind them, she didn't know how far two men in expensive suits had received an alert. Silas's men, already on her trail. Lisa had learned to make herself small. It was a skill she'd perfected over 2 years of marriage, how to fold into furniture, how to breathe quietly, how to exist in a room without taking up space. She sat rigid in seat 14C, arms wrapped around herself, eyes fixed on the clouds outside. The man beside her hadn't spoken. He was still typing on his phone, thumbs moving with mechanical precision. She could see the screen's reflection in his watch messages in Italian, she thought, though she couldn't be sure. Every few seconds, his jaw would tighten, and she'd catch the flecks of muscle beneath the ink on his neck. She tried not to look, tried not to think about whether Silas had realized she was gone yet, tried not to imagine his voice in her head. "Did you really think you could leave me?" The flight attendant came by with drinks. Lisa ordered water. Her throat was so dry it hurt to swallow. The attendant smiled, one of those professional empty smiles, and moved on. The man beside her ordered nothing, just kept typing. 20 minutes into the flight, the plane shuddered. A small bump. Nothing dramatic, just the kind of turbulence that makes experienced travelers sigh and first-timers grip their armrests. But Lisa's body didn't know the difference between a pocket of bad air and a crash. Her hands flew to the armrests. Her breath caught. The water bottle slipped from her lap and hit the floor, rolling toward the aisle. The plane dropped. Just for a second, a stomach-lurching dip that made the overhead bins rattle. Lisa's shoulder slammed against the window. She gasped a sharp, involuntary sound that she immediately tried to swallow back down. Don't draw attention. Don't let anyone see you. But the movement had pulled her hoodie to the side, and the foundation she'd caked on her throat 3 layers thick, the kind that felt like a mask had cracked. The bruises were visible now. Purple and yellow, finger-shaped, 4 marks on one side of her throat where Silas's hand had wrapped around her windpipe, a thumbprint on the other side, pressed so deep it had left a mark like a brand. She yanked the hoodie back up. Too late. The man beside her had stopped typing. She could feel his eyes on her. Heavy, unflinching. Please don't say anything. Please just look away. The turbulence hit again, harder this time. The seatbelt sign dinged on. The pilot's voice crackled through the speakers, calm and detached. "Folks, we're experiencing some choppy air. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Lisa's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't clasp them together. The plane bucked. Her breathing was coming too fast, shallow. The edges of her vision started to blur. Not here. Not now. Don't fall apart in front of strangers. But her body had other plans. The panic was rising like floodwater, and she couldn't stop it. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only feel the phantom pressure of Silas's hands around her throat, and the certainty that even at 30,000 feet, she wasn't far enough away. A voice cut through the static in her head. Low, steady, accented. "Breathe." She turned. The man beside her was looking at her now, really looking. Those dark eyes weren't cold anymore, they were sharp with understanding. Like he'd seen this before. Like he knew exactly what kind of storm was happening inside her chest. "In through your nose," he said quietly. "Out through your mouth. Slowly." She tried, failed, gasped instead. The plane dropped again. And then without asking, without hesitation, he shifted in his seat, angled his body toward her, dropped his shoulder. "Here," he said. It wasn't a command. It was an offer. Calm, certain. The kind of offer that didn't come with strings or expectations or the need to explain why she was breaking apart at the seams. Lisa stared at him. At the tattooed hand resting on the armrest. at the scar on his collarbone, at the face that looked like it had been carved from marble and violence. She should say no. She should pull away. She should remember that men who looked like him, men who moved like predators and smelled like danger, were exactly the kind of men she needed to avoid. But the turbulence hit again, and her body made the decision for her. She leaned. Her head came to rest on his shoulder. Solid, warm, steady as a coastline for a ship that had been lost at sea. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there like an anchor while the plane rattled and her breathing slowly started to even out. His suit jacket smelled like cedar and gunpowder and something else, something that felt like safety, even though she knew better than to believe in that anymore. The turbulence faded. The plane leveled out. Lisa stayed where she was. And the man with the tattooed hands pulled out his phone again, but this time, he typed with one hand. The other, he placed carefully on the armrest between them. Palm up, just in case she needed something to hold on to. Somewhere in the back of the plane, a businessman lowered his newspaper and made a mental note. He'd report back to Silas Thorne the moment they landed. The woman was alive. And she wasn't alone. Lisa hadn't meant to fall asleep. But exhaustion was a debt that eventually came due. And somewhere between the turbulence and the steady rhythm of the man's breathing beside her, her body had surrendered. She woke to the sound of the landing gear deploying. Her head was still on his shoulder. She jerked upright, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." His voice was quiet, firm. He was looking at her again with those dark, unreadable eyes. "You needed it." The plane touched down with a jolt that rattled her teeth. Reality came flooding back. Silas will know by now. He'll have people at the airport. The text she'd feared never came, but that didn't mean she was safe. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers stood, reaching for bags, checking phones, complaining about delays. Normal people returning to normal lives. Lisa stayed frozen in her seat. The man beside her stood unfolded, really, like gravity had finally released its claim on him. He pulled a leather bag from the overhead bin with one hand, movements efficient and unbothered. He glanced down at her. "You're not getting off?" Her voice caught. "I just need a minute." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once and stepped into the aisle. She thought that would be the end of it, but he didn't walk away. He stood there, blocking the aisle, ignoring the irritated sighs of passengers behind him, waiting. Lisa forced herself to stand, grabbed her backpack. Her legs felt like water. They moved with the crowd toward the exit, through the jet bridge, into the terminal. And that's when she saw them. 2 men in dark suits, earpieces, arms crossed, standing near the arrival gate, scanning every face that passed. Silas's security. Lisa's heart stopped. She didn't recognize these particular men. Silas cycled through security teams like other people, changed clothes, but she knew the type, knew the way they moved, knew they'd been given her photo and explicit instructions. They hadn't seen her yet, but they would. She spun around, looking for an exit, a bathroom, anywhere to hide, and walked straight into a wall of muscle and expensive fabric. The tattooed man. He caught her by the shoulders gently, but firm enough to steady her. His eyes dropped to her face, then followed her line of sight to the 2 men in suits. Something shifted in his expression. His jaw tightened. His grip on her shoulders became protective instead of polite. "Those men," he said quietly, "they're looking for you." It wasn't a question. Lisa couldn't speak, could only nod. He was silent for 3 seconds, thinking, calculating. Then he moved. He stepped in front of her, not blocking her, but shielding her from view. His body was a wall between her and the men in suits. He pulled his phone from his pocket and made a call. Spoke in rapid Italian. Ended the call. Looked down at her with an intensity that felt like being seen under a microscope. "Do you trust me? I don't even know you." "That's not what I asked." The 2 security men were moving closer now, methodically scanning the crowd. 30 feet away. 20. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps. The tattooed man reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. Matte black, no logo, just a phone number embossed in silver. He pressed it into her palm. "My name is Riccardo Dellucci," he said. "And you have 2 choices right now. You can walk away and handle this yourself, or you can come with me. And I promise you those men will not touch you." "Why would you help me?" His eyes flicked to her throat. to the bruises she'd tried so hard to hide. "Because I know what men like that protect," he said quietly. "And I know what they ignore." 15 feet. One of the men's heads turned in their direction. "Decide," Riccardo said. "Now." Lisa looked at the card in her hand, at the stranger who smelled like danger and offered protection in the same breath, at the 2 men who would drag her back to Silas and the estate and the inevitable ending she'd been running from. She looked up at Riccardo. "Help me." He didn't smile, didn't nod, just took her hand, the one holding the card, and pulled her into the crowd. They moved fast. He knew exactly where he was going. Through a side corridor, down a flight of stairs, into a private section of the terminal, marked, "Authorized personnel only." A black SUV was waiting at the curb. The back door opened. Riccardo looked at her one last time. "Get in, or don't, but choose." Behind them, she heard footsteps, voices. "There. Gray hoodie." Lisa dove into the SUV. Riccardo slid in beside her. The door slammed shut. And as the vehicle pulled away from the curb, she saw the 2 security men burst through the terminal doors too late, faces twisted with fury. One of them was already on his phone. Riccardo made another call, spoke 2 words in Italian, ended it, looked at Lisa with eyes that held no judgment, only certainty. "You're safe now," he said. But the way he said safe didn't sound like freedom. It sounded like a different kind of cage. The SUV didn't speak. Neither did the driver, a man built like a freight train with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. He navigated the city streets with the precision of someone who'd made this drive 1,000 times, never once glancing in the rearview mirror. Lisa sat pressed against the door, as far from Riccardo as the leather seat would allow. Her mind was screaming. "What did you just do? You got into a car with a stranger. A man covered in tattoos who moves like violence is a second language. You ran from one dangerous man straight into the arms of another." But when she looked at Riccardo, he wasn't watching her. He was looking out the window, jaw set, one hand resting on his knee. The other was typing on his phone again, that same mechanical rhythm she'd seen on the plane. He'd saved her. Or kidnapped her. She wasn't sure which yet. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Somewhere his men can't reach you." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it was terrifying. "You don't even know who I'm running from." "Yes, I do." Riccardo's eyes stayed on the window. "I made a call while you were sleeping on the plane. Gave my people your first name and the flight number. It took them 40 minutes to connect you to Silas Thorne." Lisa's stomach dropped. "How? You weren't as invisible as you thought." He finally looked at her. "Silas filed a missing persons report 3 hours ago. Listed you as mentally unstable. Claimed you stopped taking medication. He's painting himself as the concerned husband trying to bring his sick wife home." The air left Lisa's lungs. I'm not. "I know." Riccardo's voice was flat. "Factual. I also know he's a tech billionaire with a philanthropic public image and a private habit of collecting things he thinks he owns." He paused. "Including you." She flinched. He noticed. His expression didn't soften, but something in his eyes shifted, like he was recalculating how to speak to someone who'd been shattered and badly glued back together. "I'm not him," Riccardo said quietly. "I won't hurt you. You don't know me." "No. But I know men like him." His voice dropped lower, colder, "and I know how to make them disappear." The SUV pulled into an underground garage. Concrete pillars, dim lighting, private parking spaces marked with numbers instead of names. They stopped in front of an elevator with a keypad instead of buttons. Riccardo stepped out, held the door open for her. Lisa didn't move. "You can leave," he said. "I'll have my driver take you anywhere you want to go. But understand, Silas already knows you're in this city. His men saw you at the airport. You have maybe 6 hours before they find you. And if I stay, then you're under my protection, which means his men won't find you at all." She looked at him, really looked. At the scars on his hands, the ink that disappeared under his collar. The way he stood like a man who'd spent his life making impossible decisions and living with the consequences. "Who are you?" she whispered. He almost smiled. "Almost. Someone who handles monsters." Lisa got out of the car. The penthouse was a study in contradictions. Black marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like a kingdom. Furniture that looked more like sculpture than something people actually sat on. Everything sharp angles and expensive silence. It should have felt cold, but there were details that didn't fit. A bookshelf crammed with worn paperbacks. A chess set mid-game on a side table. A single framed photo of a woman with kind eyes and Riccardo's same sharp jaw. Lisa stood in the entryway, clutching her backpack like a shield. Riccardo shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over a chair, rolled up his sleeves. The tattoos went all the way to his elbows, roses and thorns, and something that looked like Latin scripture wrapped around his forearms. "You're safe here," he said. "The building has security, cameras, people who work for me. His men won't get past the lobby." "Why are you doing this?" He was quiet for a moment, poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, something amber and expensive, and didn't offer her one. "When I was 12, he finally said. "I watched my father beat my mother so badly she couldn't stand. I was too small to stop him, too weak." He took a sip, stared at the glass like it held answers. "I'm not small anymore." Lisa's chest tightened. Riccardo set the glass down, looked at her with eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. "I'm not a good man, Lisa. I run an organization that operates in shadows. I make decisions that keep me awake at night. But I have rules, and rule number 1 is simple. Men who hurt women answer to me. Silas doesn't live in your city. He does now." The weight of those 3 words settled over the room like a threat. Lisa should have been terrified. But instead, for the first time in 2 years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. "There's a guest room down the hall," Riccardo said. "Lock on the inside. Bathroom. Clean clothes in the closet, they'll be too big, but they're yours if you need them. I can't pay you." "I'm not asking you to." "Then what do you want?" He looked at her for a long moment, then walked to the window, hands in his pockets, silhouette framed against the city lights. "I want you to tell me everything," he said. "Every bruise, every threat, every way he made you feel small." "Why?" He turned, and the expression on his face was something ancient and cold and utterly certain. "Because I'm going to destroy him." Lisa opened her mouth to respond, but Riccardo's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his entire body went rigid. "What?" Lisa whispered. "What is it?" He showed her the screen. A message from an unknown number. A photo of the airport terminal, time-stamped 30 minutes ago. Lisa and Riccardo, walking side by side toward the private corridor. And below it, a message. "I know who has her. You made a mistake, Dellucci." It was signed with 2 initials. S.T. Lisa couldn't breathe. "He knows your name." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He knows who you are. He's going to—" "He knows nothing." Riccardo's voice cut through her panic like a blade. He pocketed his phone, expression unreadable. "He knows I took you. He doesn't know where you are. But he'll find out. He always finds out. He has people everywhere. Lawyers, private investigators, politicians. He owns half the city council back home. He'll—" "Lisa." Riccardo stepped closer, not crowding her, just close enough that she had to look at him. "Listen to me very carefully. Silas Thorne is powerful in his world. Tech acquisitions, board meetings, charity galas where people smile and pretend not to notice the monsters in expensive suits." He held up his phone, the threatening message still glowing on the screen. "But this—" His voice dropped to something cold and precise. "This is my world. And in my world, men like him don't make threats. They beg." Before Lisa could respond, Riccardo made a call. "Dante, I'm sending you a name. Silas Thorne. I want everything. Bank records, shell companies, NDAs, payoffs, mistresses, encrypted emails. Everything he's ever done, that he paid someone to bury, and I want it in 6 hours." He paused, listened. "I don't care what it costs. Burn every favor we have." He ended the call, looked at Lisa. "Sit down," he said gently. "This is going to take a while." 6 hours later, Lisa was still awake. She'd tried to sleep. Riccardo had shown her to a guest room with a bed so soft it felt like floating. Walls painted a calming gray, blackout curtains that turned the city into a distant memory. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Silas's face, felt his hands around her throat, heard his voice in her ear. "You're nothing without me." So she sat in the living room instead, curled in an oversized armchair, watching Riccardo work. He'd changed into a black t-shirt and dark jeans. The tattoos on his arms were fully visible now, intricate, beautiful, and vaguely threatening. He sat at a glass desk with 3 monitors, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to people whose names Lisa didn't recognize. Documents appeared on the screens. Financial records, emails, photos. And with every new file, Riccardo's expression grew colder. "Cristo," he muttered at one point, leaning back in his chair. "This bastardo is worse than I thought." Lisa stood, walked over. "What did you find?" He glanced up at her, hesitated, then turned one of the monitors so she could see. It was an email chain. Silas's name at the top, and below it, a series of payments to a law firm with a very specific specialty, making assault allegations disappear. Lisa's hands started shaking. "There are others," she whispered. "5 that we've found so far." Riccardo's voice was flat, controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. "All NDAs, all settlements paid through shell companies so his name stays clean." He pulled up another file, a photo of a young woman, brunette, early 20s, eyes that looked haunted even through the pixelated image. "Her name is Rachel Moss. She worked as his personal assistant 3 years ago. He put her in the hospital, paid her $200,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and disappear." Lisa's stomach turned. "She wasn't the first," Riccardo continued. "And you weren't going to be the last." He stood, paced to the window, stared out at the city like he was planning a war. "I have enough," he said quietly. "Enough to bury him. The bribes, the payoffs, the women he silenced, it's all here. I can send this to every major news outlet in the country. His investors will pull out. His board will force him to resign. His empire will collapse in 72 hours. He turned to face her. "But I need your permission." "My permission?" "Because once I do this, there's no going back. Silas will know it was you. He'll know you're the reason his life fell apart. And men like him, when they lose everything, they become desperate. Dangerous." Lisa thought about the kitchen clock, the cruel way it ticked, the years she'd spent folding herself into nothing. She thought about Rachel Moss and the 4 other women whose names she didn't know. She thought about the girl she used to be, the florist who loved peonies and believed in second chances. And she thought about the woman she wanted to become. "Do it," she said. Riccardo studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Dante," he said into the phone. "Release everything." By dawn, Silas Thorne's name was poison. The first article dropped at 6:47 a.m. Tech mogul accused of pattern of abuse, bribery to silence victims. By 7:15, his company's stock had dropped 18%. By 8:30, 3 board members had resigned. By 9, the hashtag number Thorneabuse was trending worldwide. Lisa watched it happen from Riccardo's penthouse, monitors glowing with headline after headline, her coffee going cold in her hands. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt terrified, because Riccardo's phone buzzed at 9:47 a.m. He looked at the screen, and his face went dark. "What?" Lisa whispered. He turned the phone toward her. A new message, from Silas himself this time. A photo of Riccardo's building, taken from street level. And below it, 4 words. "You can't hide forever." The photograph changed everything. Riccardo was on the phone within seconds, barking orders in Italian, his voice stripped of the careful control he'd maintained since the airport. Lisa caught fragments. Perimeter, surveillance, double the guards. He ended the call and turned to her with an expression that made her stomach drop. "He knows where we are. Then we leave. Right now. No." Riccardo's voice was firm. "Running won't solve this. Silas is escalating because he's desperate. His empire is crumbling. He has nothing left except revenge." Lisa's legs felt like they might give out. "Then what do we do?" Riccardo was silent for a long moment, jaw working like he was grinding through options. "We end this," he said finally. "Today." He brought her to the study, a room lined with books and locked filing cabinets, a single desk in the center with a laptop and a small black flash drive sitting beside it. He gestured to the chair. "Sit." Lisa sat. Riccardo remained standing, arms crossed, that familiar intensity radiating from him like heat from a furnace. "I've spent the last 6 hours destroying Silas Thorne's reputation," he said. "His investors are gone. His board is in chaos. The media is tearing him apart. But you want to know what happens next?" Lisa nodded, unable to speak. "He hires crisis management, pays for sympathetic interviews, claims he's the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by enemies and disgruntled former employees. In 6 months, maybe a year, people forget. He rebuilds, maybe not to the same height, but enough." He picked up the flash drive, held it between two tattooed fingers like it was both a weapon and a confession. "This," he said quietly, "is every piece of evidence my people found. Financial records, emails, testimonies from the women he paid to disappear, photos of injuries, medical reports. A paper trail that proves beyond any doubt exactly who Silas Thorne is when the cameras aren't watching." He set it down in front of her. "I can release this. I can make sure every news outlet, every prosecutor, every person with a conscience sees what he's done. I can bury him so deep, he'll never surface again." Lisa stared at the flash drive. It was so small, such a tiny thing to hold so much pain. "Then do it," she whispered. "No." Her head snapped up. "What?" Riccardo leaned against the desk, his voice soft but unyielding. "If I do it, you'll always wonder if you were strong enough to do it yourself. If I destroy him, he becomes my enemy, and you become the woman I saved. A victim I rescued." He crouched down so they were eye level. "But if you do it, if you stand in front of a camera and tell your story, if you look the world in the eye and say his name out loud, then you stop being his victim. You become the woman who took her life back." Tears burned Lisa's eyes. "I can't. I'm not brave enough. You escaped a man who swore you'd never leave. You boarded a plane with nothing but hope and a handful of stolen bills. You're sitting here right now instead of back in that house, convinced you deserved what he did to you." His voice was fierce. "Certain, you're the bravest person I've ever met. You just don't know it yet." Lisa's breath caught. Riccardo stood, pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it beside the flash drive. "Her name is Angela Reeves, investigative journalist. I've already contacted her. She'll meet you anywhere you choose. A coffee shop, a park, her office. She'll record your story. Protect your identity if you want, or put your face on every screen in the country if that's what you decide." He paused. "But it has to be your choice, not mine." Lisa looked at the flash drive, the business card, the man who'd given her a way out but refused to take the final step for her. "What if I freeze?" she whispered. "What if I can't find the words?" "Then you try again. And again, until you do." "What if Silas comes for me?" Riccardo's expression went cold. "Deadly. Then he'll have to go through me first. And I promise you, Lisa, he won't." She believed him. For the first time since she'd met Silas Thorne in that glittering ballroom 3 years ago, Lisa believed someone could actually keep her safe. She picked up the flash drive, held it in her palm like a grenade. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." Riccardo almost smiled. "When?" "Now. Before I lose my nerve." He pulled out his phone, made a call. "Angela, she's ready." 2 hours later, Lisa sat across from a woman with sharp eyes and a recorder on the table between them. Angela Reeves looked like someone who'd spent her career digging through lies and forcing the truth into daylight. Gray hair pulled back. No makeup. A face that promised she wouldn't look away from ugly things. "Whenever you're ready," Angela said gently. Lisa's hands were shaking. Riccardo stood by the door close enough to be a presence, far enough to let her do this alone. She took a breath and began. "My name is Lisa Baker, and for 2 years, I was married to a man who almost killed me." The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. She told Angela everything. The first time Silas hit her, the way he apologized with diamonds and promises, the escalation, the isolation, the night she realized he would never stop. The escape. She cried. Angela handed her tissues and didn't interrupt. When Lisa finished, the room was silent, except for the hum of the recorder. Angela reached across the table, squeezed Lisa's hand. "Thank you," she said. "This is going to help a lot of people." Lisa nodded, throat too tight to speak. Angela stood. "I'll have the article ready by tomorrow morning. It'll run at 8 a.m. She left. Riccardo walked over, sat in the chair Angela had vacated. "How do you feel?" he asked. Lisa wiped her eyes. Thought about it. "Terrified," she admitted. "But also lighter. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years, and I finally put it down." "You did." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Riccardo's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and every muscle in his body went rigid. "What?" Lisa asked, fear creeping back in. "What is it?" He showed her the message. From Silas. "You want to tell stories? Fine. Meet me at the Belmont Hotel. Tomorrow, noon. Come alone. Or I'll make sure every outlet knows Dellucci is harboring a mentally unstable woman who abandoned her loving husband. Your choice. Lisa's blood turned to ice. It's a trap, she whispered. I know. Then we don't go. Riccardo looked at her with eyes that had already made the decision. Yes, he said quietly. We do. Lisa didn't sleep. She spent the night in Riccardo's guest room, staring at the ceiling, playing out every possible scenario of what could happen at the Belmont Hotel. Silas would be charming. He always was in public. He'd smile that smile, the one that made strangers think he was a good man, the one that hid the monster underneath. He'd try to convince her to come back, promise it would be different this time, tell her she was overreacting, being dramatic, letting her emotions cloud her judgment. And if that didn't work, he'd threaten her. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. At 11 a.m., Riccardo knocked on her door. It's time. Lisa looked at herself in the mirror. She'd borrowed clothes from the closet, black jeans, a simple sweater, boots that were 2 sizes too big but didn't matter. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup to hide the fading bruises on her throat. She wanted him to see what he'd done. Riccardo stood in the doorway, dressed in another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray with a black shirt underneath. The tattoos on his hands were visible, deliberate. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who'd built an empire in shadows and wasn't afraid of daylight. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I can meet him alone. End this without you having to see his face again. No. Lisa's voice was steadier than she expected. I need to be there. I need to look him in the eye and tell him I'm done. Riccardo studied her for a moment, then nodded. Stay close to me. No matter what he says, no matter what he does, stay close. I will. They left the penthouse together. The Belmont Hotel was the kind of place Silas loved. All marble and gold accents and chandeliers that cost more than most people's cars. The lobby was crowded, business travelers checking in, tourists taking photos, a wedding party laughing near the elevators. Witnesses. Silas had chosen this location carefully, public enough that Riccardo couldn't make him disappear, crowded enough that a scene would be noticed. Lisa spotted him immediately. He sat in a leather armchair near the lobby bar, legs crossed, perfectly pressed suit, hair styled like he'd just come from a photo shoot. He looked calm, composed, like he hadn't just spent the last 24 hours watching his empire crumble. But when his eyes locked on Lisa, something dark flickered across his face. Rage, quickly masked by that familiar smile. He stood as they approached, spread his arms like he was greeting old friends. Lisa, his voice was warm, public. I'm so glad you came. She said nothing. Riccardo positioned himself slightly in front of her, not blocking, but protective. His presence was a wall of silent threat. Silas's eyes flicked to him. The smile tightened. And you must be the man who's been filling my wife's head with lies. She's not your wife anymore, Riccardo said evenly. And the only liar here is you. Silas laughed, a practiced, charming sound designed to make Riccardo look unreasonable. Lisa, sweetheart. He ignored Riccardo entirely now, focused on her with the intensity she knew so well. Please, let's talk, just the two of us. I know you're scared. I know you think you need to do this, but I'm not scared. Lisa's voice cut through his words like a blade. Silas blinked. He wasn't used to being interrupted. She stepped forward, out from behind Riccardo's protective stance, into the space between the two men, and for the first time in 2 years, she looked at Silas Thorne without flinching. I'm not coming back, she said, her voice carried across the lobby. People were starting to notice. I'm not your wife. I'm not your possession. I'm not the woman you can control anymore. Silas's smile vanished. His voice dropped to a hiss. You're making a mistake. Do you have any idea what I can do to you? The lawyers I have? I will destroy you. You already tried. Lisa's hands were shaking, but her voice stayed strong. You destroyed the woman I was, but she's gone now. And the woman standing here? You don't own her. Lisa. The article publishes tomorrow morning, she continued. My face, my name, my story. Every person in this country is going to know exactly who you are. Silas's face went red. He took a step toward her. Riccardo moved. Not aggressive. just a shift putting himself between Silas and Lisa with the kind of quiet menace that made Silas freeze mid-step. "Touch her," Riccardo said softly, "and you'll lose more than your reputation." The lobby had gone quiet. People were watching now. Phones out. Recording. Silas looked around, realized he was trapped. That every word, every movement, was being documented by strangers who would post it online before he made it to the parking garage. He looked back at Lisa, and for the first time, she saw him for what he really was. Small, not powerful, not terrifying, just a man who'd built his identity on controlling someone weaker than him. And without her, he was nothing. "You'll regret this," Silas said quietly, desperately. "You'll come crawling back." "No," Lisa's voice was calm now. "Final. I won't, because I'm finally free." She turned her back on him, walked away. Riccardo followed, his hand resting lightly on her lower back, a reminder that she wasn't alone. Behind them, Silas shouted something. Lisa didn't hear it, didn't care. She kept walking. Out of the lobby, through the revolving doors, into the sunlight, and for the first time in 2 years, the air tasted like freedom. They were in the SUV when Riccardo's phone rang. He answered, listened. His expression shifted from neutral to something almost pleased. "Understood," he said. "Thank you." He ended the call, looked at Lisa. "That was my contact at the federal prosecutor's office," he said. "They've been building a case against Silas for months. Tax evasion, wire fraud, bribery. Your testimony and the evidence we provided gave them everything they needed." Lisa's breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means there's a warrant out for his arrest. They're picking him up tonight." The call came at 9:47 p.m. Lisa was in Riccardo's guest room, trying to read but unable to focus on the words. Her mind kept replaying the lobby. Silas's face, the way he'd looked when she walked away. Small, powerless, free. Riccardo knocked softly. "Lisa, you'll want to see this." She followed him to the living room, where the TV was tuned to a news channel. Breaking. Tech billionaire Silas Thorne arrested on federal charges. The footage showed Silas being led out of his estate in handcuffs. Photographers swarming. Reporters shouting questions. His face was twisted with fury and humiliation. Lisa watched in silence, waiting to feel something. Victory. Relief. Joy. Instead, she just felt tired. "I should be happy," she whispered. Riccardo turned off the TV. "You feel exhausted, because you've been carrying the weight of his violence for 2 years. And now that it's gone, your body doesn't know what to do with the space." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "How long until I feel normal again?" "I don't know." His voice was honest, kind. "But you will." He didn't touch her, didn't offer false comfort. Just stood there, solid and present, until her breathing evened out. "What happens now?" Lisa asked. "Now," Riccardo said, "you decide who you want to become." 3 months later. The Foundation's office was small but bright, large windows, plants on every surface, a couch where women could sit and tell their stories without feeling interrogated. Lisa stood at the window, watching the street below. She'd cut her hair, started therapy, learned how to sleep without waking up in a panic every 2 hours. She wasn't healed, not entirely, but she was healing. Behind her, the door opened. "Your 3 o'clock is here," her assistant said. "Rachel Moss." Lisa turned, smiled. "Send her in." Rachel walked in slowly, brunette, late 20s, eyes that still carried shadows but also something new. "Hope." "Thank you for seeing me," Rachel said quietly. "Of course." Lisa gestured to the couch. "Sit, please." They talked for an hour. Rachel told her story, the same patterns, the same tactics, the same man who'd convinced her she was nothing without him. When Rachel left, she hugged Lisa at the door. "You saved my life," Rachel whispered. "No," Lisa said gently. "You saved your own. I just showed you it was possible." That evening, Lisa locked up the office and found Riccardo waiting outside. He still wore expensive suits, still moved like danger was a second language. But there was something different now, something softer in the way he looked at her. "You didn't have to come," Lisa said. "I know." They'd been doing this for weeks. These careful, quiet moments, dinners that weren't dates, conversations that felt like confessions. He'd kept his distance, Never pushed, never assumed. But he kept showing up. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Riccardo said. "Business in Rome. I'll be gone 2 weeks." "Okay. I can stay. If you need me to." Lisa looked at him, this man who'd saved her, protected her, given her the space to become someone new. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked softly. He was quiet for a long moment. "Because when I look at you," he finally said, "I don't see someone who needs saving anymore. I see someone who chose to survive, who turned her pain into purpose, who's braver than anyone I've ever met." He stepped closer. "I'm not staying because you need me, Lisa. I'm staying because I want to. Because you make me believe that people like us, people who've seen the worst of the world, can still find something good." Lisa's heart was pounding. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "For whatever this is. I'm still figuring out who I am without him." "I know." Riccardo's voice was gentle, patient. "And I'll wait, as long as it takes." He turned to leave. "Riccardo?" He stopped, looked back. "When you come back from Rome." Lisa took a breath. "Maybe we could have dinner. A real one." He smiled, the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. "I'd like that." He walked away, and Lisa stood in the fading light, watching him go, feeling something she thought she'd lost forever. Peace. She pulled out her phone, opened her messages, and typed 3 words to the Foundation's group chat: 12 women, all survivors, all finding their way back to themselves. "We're going to be okay." Her phone buzzed immediately. A response from Rachel. "Yes, we are." Lisa smiled, looked up at the sky, and finally, after 2 years of darkness, she saw the light. 6 months later, Silas Thorne was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Lisa's foundation expanded to 3 cities, and when Riccardo returned from Rome, he brought her a single white peony. "For new beginnings," he said. She took his hand, and this time, she didn't let go. If Lisa's story touched your heart, there are thousands more like hers, waiting to be told. Stories of courage, of survival, of women who refuse to stay broken. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because every day, we bring you a new story of strength rising from darkness. Your support helps us reach women who need to hear that escape is possible, that freedom is real, that they're not alone. Drop a comment below. What moment in Lisa's journey resonated with you the most? And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, share it. You might save a life. See you in the next story. Stay strong, stay free,